I cannot be more clear that what I'm going to say. Nothing changed for health services, so people will be able to receive their services in English, their health services in English. So it was that before Bill 96, it's that during Bill 96, and it will be that after Bill 96.
Simon Jolin Barrette, the master, if you will, the crafter of Bill 96, which has now been officially adopted. It happened just a little while ago this afternoon. It is now adopted, meaning it becomes law. So it looks like everything that everyone had to say, all the protests, all the doubts that so many different organizations and individuals expressed meant absolutely nothing to the CAQ. This passed anyway. Of course, that was a foregone conclusion. Trying to get some reaction. So let's start off with Russell Copeman, Executive Director of the Quebec English School Boards Association. Russell, we've spoken on this before. Now it's here. Give me your reaction.
Well, it's a sad day, Aaron, for Quebec. I think, we've the QESBA and sister organizations demonstrated, and other commentators, by the way, demonstrated that not only is Bill 96 bad for English-speaking Quebecers, but it's bad for Quebecers in general. And it will, I think, ultimately do damage to this place we call home.
So now what? What happens next? How soon can the legal challenges begin?
Well, I mean, challenging this legislation is going to be difficult because of the use of the notwithstanding clause, right? It's not going to be impossible because there are some parts of happily, the Canadian Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that you cannot set aside with the notwithstanding clause. So, for example, the language of the courts, you can't override with the notwithstanding clause. But clearly, it's going to be more difficult, having suspended the fundamental rights of Quebecers under the Quebec Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Charter. Legal challenges are more complex and more difficult, but I'm sure there will be. Julius Gray and others wrote about that as recently as today.
I'm curious because when the whole idea of this government getting rid of school boards came up, you were prepared, and we know that, suits followed, et cetera. It's a different scenario this time, Russell, from what it was then?
It is different because, happily, the section of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protects the English-speaking community's right to control and manage our education system, namely Section 23, cannot be overridden by the notwithstanding clause. And so, we're still waiting for a judgment after having obtained a stay on Bill 40. We're still waiting for a judgment on the constitutionality of that legislation which abolishes school boards. By the way, it's the same protection under Section 23 that allowed Justice Blanchard of the Quebec Superior Court to strike down those provisions of Bill 21, the secularism law, as they apply to English school boards. So, were it not for a government appeal of that, Bill 21 would not apply to English school boards under those same control and management rights. So, as I say, certain provisions of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms cannot be overridden by the notwithstanding clause. Section 23 is one of them, but all the provisions relating to the language of justice cannot be overridden as well because they're in separate sections of the Canadian Constitution. So, for example, this requirement that the Minister of Justice approve the postings for bilingual judges, many people feel that that's an undue limit and is unconstitutional. And I suspect there will be a court challenge about that. The requirement that people go to court with a certified translation of documents in French, I suspect will be challenged.
Right.
So there are aspects of it that will be challenged, I'm utterly convinced, by certain groups. But as I say, it's rendered more more difficult because of the use of the notwithstanding clause.
Just as a final question, do you personally feel let down? You were there. You were one of the organizers involved in that rally that we were at, of course, last weekend. This was a foregone conclusion in your mind?
Look, one always hopes. There were a lot of reaction from Indigenous groups, and even in the French media, there's been a flurry in the last week or so of columnists and groups pointing to the flaws or the more egregious provisions of Bill 96. Now, obviously, it came too late, and the government was determined to push ahead. So, I'm not sure it was a foregone conclusion. I think it was a bit of a long shot to try and effect change in the last week or so, or 10 days, but it was well worth the effort. I think, Aaron, I'm more, like many English-speaking Quebecers, saddened by this, angered, but also, questioning my place here in Quebec. Mm-hmm. For the first time in my adult life, I'm beginning to feel that I'm not wholly welcome here, and that's been a change for me. Certainly, I argued with friends and family and colleagues about that issue for decades. And I have to say that this last sort of nail in our coffin, if you will, has been a heavy blow.
Russell, I want to thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Want to get another take here. Joe Ortona, been in a bit of a Twitter war with Christopher Skeeth the past couple of days. He, of course, is the chair of the English Montreal School Board. Joe, we've talked before, not necessarily about this bill, but today is the day. Bill 96 is adopted. Give me your take.
It's not surprising, but very disappointing. And I share the sentiments that Russell COPEMAN just gave. Disappointed, not sure, not feeling wholly welcome here right now. And it's a sad day. It's a sad day in Quebec's history. Some of the same feelings that I have today are the feelings I had when Bill 21 was adopted. I remain convinced that history will look back on these bills as discriminatory, as unjust, and quite frankly, as an embarrassment for Quebec's history.
I mentioned about this Twitter war, and I saw the other day Christopher Skeeth, and of course he's kind of been the middleman, if you will, for Quebec Anglos, and he's the conduit to the Premier himself, wrote, I'm the MNA for St. Rose, elected under the banner of the CAQ. In 2018, the Coalition won the election. Our platform included pass a secularism bill, eliminate school boards, and pass a Bill 101 upgrade. I am a politician, not an ombudsman. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that, but you took him to task rather quickly. What's going on between you and him?
Well, the irony is that, first of all, he's not the minister responsible for English-speaking Quebecers. That ironically, that portfolio belongs to the Premier. He's the minister responsible for English-speaking Quebecers. But it seems like whenever the Premier doesn't feel like or is too afraid to face the questions of English-speaking Quebecers, he sends Mr. Skeeth to sort of act like the ombudsman and defend the bills that the government presents. And so I just basically, call out sometimes when he writes things and contradicts himself or point out the hypocrisy of his government's position. You're basically patting yourself on the back for the bills that you adopted, all of which have been struck down as being unconstitutional in part. That's not something to be proud of.
Okay.
Well, and as a politician, just that the statement makes no sense to me, because as a politician, you are compelled to defend the interest of your constituents. And so I feel, okay, maybe not officially an ombudsman, but there is a part of your job that is trying to make sure that the people who voted for you are taken care of. So he's making the assumption that every single person that voted for them supports this view, which I don't think is true.
Well, let me tell you what he said, and I just got this back. I tweeted at him and said, what do you mean, or what did you mean by I am a politician, not an ombudsman? And he wrote back saying, I'm often told my job is to represent the English community. While that's true, I'm also bound by the electoral promises my party has made. I'm a member of a political party, a party that promised to pass Bill 9, Bill 21, Bill 40, Bill 96, People are shocked that I vote for these, should remember that I am a CAC MNA, that my presence in a non-Anglo traditional party is the very diversity the community espouses. That was his answer to that question.
But I think I don't think I think he misses the point completely. Nobody's shocked that he votes for these things. We're shocked that he stands for these things, and we're shocked that this party and this government stands for these things. I mean, he swore an oath on the to uphold the Constitution of Canada, and here we are, notwithstanding clause, blanket use whenever it can be invoked. All to score political points. I mean, again, that's not something to be proud of.
No, taking rights away from one group to try and help another group, it defeats the entire purpose. I can't say that too many times. So what happens next, Joe? How have you left things?
I'm sorry? I missed the question.
How have you left things with Christopher Skeet?
Well, every once in a while, I respond to him. He responds to me. That's fine. We obviously, have great disagreements on, fundamental issues and quite frankly, fundamental principles, constitutional principles. That's fine. We'll agree to disagree. I've learned long ago, however, in dealing with this government, the Minister of Education are, taking our schools, that I have more faith in the court system than I do in the politicians actually listening to us and respecting the English-speaking community and the rights of Anglophones in Quebec.
Joe, I want to thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Joe,
thank you.
You bet. Joe Ortona, chair of the English Montreal School Board. Reaction from him, reaction from Russell COPEMAN. Bill 96 has now been officially adopted in the National Assembly.